Vamos a dar... Muy buenos días a todas y a todos. Mi nombre es Cristóbal Tello, soy el director del Laboratorio de Innovación Pública, una iniciativa interdisciplinaria liderada por el Centro de Políticas Públicas y la Escuela de Diseño de la Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. En nombre de todos los organizadores, le doy la bienvenida al seminario Desafíos de la Innovación Social frente a la incertidumbre. Y más que un seminario, esta actividad busca hacer una conversación con nuestro distinguido invitado, Ezio Mancini. Ezio es un académico y diseñador italiano conocido internacionalmente por su trabajo en diseño para la innovación social y la sostenibilidad. Él es profesor honorario en el Politécnico de Milano, catedrático de la Universidad de las Artes de Londres. Actualmente es profesor distinguido de diseño para la innovación social en el ISABA y es profesor invitado en las universidades de Tonji y la Universidad de Yangnan. Eso ha escrito numerosos libros a lo largo de toda su trayectoria. Quisiera destacar los últimos tres que creo que van a ser parte de la conversación que vamos a tener hoy día. En 2015 publicó el libro Diseño cuando todo el mundo diseña, donde ofrece una descripción general de la forma en que el diseño se ha implementado en el espacio de innovación social para guiar la transición hacia prácticas más sostenibles. En 2018 publicó Política de lo cotidiano, un libro muy actual para lo que estamos viviendo en nuestro país, con ejemplos de cómo la innovación social muestra, incluso en tiempos difíciles, cómo puede mejorar la sociedad en que vivimos. Al unir autonomía y colaboración, plantea el profesor Mancini, es posible desarrollar nuevas formas de inteligencia y diseño para nuestro propio bien, para el bien de las comunidades de las que formamos parte y para la sociedad en conjunto. Y este año acaba de publicar un libro que se llama Viviendo la proximidad, en que aborda los desafíos de construir una ciudad de 15 minutos, una ciudad a escala humana, densa y diversificada en funciones, caracterizada por espacios públicos y una mezcla de actividades residenciales y manufactureras. Este seminario de hoy se organiza con ocasión de la incorporación de nuestro Laboratorio de Innovación Pública a la red internacional DESIS, una red que fue fundada por el profesor Ezio Mancini y que agrupa a distintas universidades, escuelas de diseño y otro tipo de organizaciones en el ámbito del diseño para la innovación social y la sostenibilidad. Red DESIS de la que nos sentimos muy orgullosos de formar parte. Aprovecho entonces también de saludar a Teresa Franqueira, profesora de la Universidad de Aveiro, que nos acompaña hoy día también y quien es coordinadora internacional de DESI. Este seminario está organizado en tres momentos. Primero, el profesor Mancini hará una presentación inicial. En la segunda parte, los académicos UC e investigadores del Laboratorio de Innovación Pública, Mariana Fulgueiras y José Alart, conversarán con el profesor Mancini a partir de sus planteamientos. Y en la última parte vamos a recoger algunas preguntas que ustedes nos pueden hacer llegar a través del chat. Les recuerdo que la presentación inicial y la conversación posterior serán en inglés y que ustedes pueden escuchar la traducción simultánea en español en el botón que está en su parte inferior de la pantalla que dice interpretación. Dejo entonces con ustedes al profesor Ezio Mancini. Profesor Mancini.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be with you, even in this digital modality, and happy to be in Chile, and happy that you finally have this DASIS lab. Then really make me proud to have the opportunity to to share with you my thoughts in this specific moment that I think could be a very important moment. So as has been said, we have a different way of, different modality of conversation. And the organizer kindly asked me to start with less than 20 minutes presentation of some ideas. So I tried to make my mind what will be better to say in this relatively short time. And I arrived to think to propose you where we are, means where I am in some way, talking and discussing and thinking about what is happening and what could be the role of social innovation and design for social innovation, and putting together some questions that are open and that can be in some way faced on the basis of what we have learned in the past 15 years, because at the moment we have more or less 15 years of story if we talk about social innovation and design for social innovation. So let me share the screen. This is my screen. What happened? Oh. Sorry, it worked so well before. What is happening now? Do you see it?
Yes.
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 Okay. Okay. You see, there is always a little bit of tension in this moment when you have to open. You don't know if you will open or not. But it worked. So this is already a very good starting point. So what you see here is the very general title that I gave when somebody asked me to introduce the notion about social innovation in design. And what is good today, not today, only today, but in this period, is that now in some way we have not only to say what it is, but we can show a kind of movie. As I always say, normally in the past, to give conferences about social innovation and design, it was mainly a kind of picture. So we represented what we was seeing about social innovation and what design can do. Now, after, as I said, more or less 15 years that since we have started to work on this subject, we can not only explain what it is, but also to tell the story of how some idea evolved and where we are. And also, most importantly, what we have learned from this past period. And for me, I could give this other title that could be better. So, there are some motivations, some reasons to say that very probably we will face, or we are already facing, a second wave of social innovation. Maybe you know, maybe not, but every kind of innovation is not linear, goes by waves. And therefore, we have been accustomed to talk about the different waves of technological innovations, and they have been very well studied because they have been reputed very important. When we discovered social innovation, we thought that was something new, but in the reality, of course, it was not new. Social innovation always happened. What we were discovering at the beginning of this century was a specific wave of social innovation, a wave that started in certain place, in certain condition, driven by certain kind of needs. And we imagined that this had to be the social innovation. Now we recognize that social innovation has been something else also in the past, before this wave, and has been different and will be different for sure. There will be new waves of social innovation in the future. So the first wave of social innovation, probably you know, in the past 10 years ago, I spent all my presentation explaining something that you can see in one slide, and I'm sure that you understand what it is. So we started to observe that facing some difficulties, there were a group of people that were able to find the solution. So very precisely to invent new idea on how to face some problem. And afterward, to gather together some people and to create some form of community that were the community that started to practice new way of living or doing. This could be about food, has been discussed a lot about food, moving from the traditional modern idea of industrial highly intensive in energy and chemical food distributed by big, large distribution system toward the local, the regional, the seasonal, the biological food, and organizing different kind of food network or food, food co-op or food network in between the people in the city, for instance, and the countryside. Or you have had, you had in the center people creating a new idea of welfare state or social services. And what you can see is people that help each other in some way. Or you can have people retaking a kind of ownership of the street and the square, and they want to do something for bettering them or taking care of them. Or having people that was develop an idea of collaborative living, discovering that to live in different boxes in the city, each box in principle having everything you need, could be not so satisfying, and it would be better to have your private space, but to have the possibility also to share something with the others, and so on and so forth. So here you have 6 or 9 images corresponding to 9 different solutions idea, but they were much more than that. And at the beginning, we call them creative communities. Creative because those people really have been able to break a certain way of living, mainly based on an individualistic and competitive idea of what to do in the society, and organize something in a collaborative way to find some solution that was considered better than the other ones. And I think that we wrote a paper book. We also wrote a book called The Creative Communities 12 years ago. And afterwards, we discovered that this creative community were part of this larger vision that is social innovation. So before we discovered these communities, and afterward, we recognized that they were part of innovation. When you recognize that it's part of innovation and the time goes on, what happens with these creative communities? The creative communities, some of them die because, as all the human things, they could have a cycle and they can live or die. Some of them changed in something that was not anymore so good. I can recall you, if you don't know, that some, for me, monsters as Uber, for instance, at the beginning, not the beginning of Uber, but the idea of Uber was carpooling, nice people sharing the car. And so this is an example of how some good ideas has been in some way evolved in direction that we can totally dislike. The whole story of the shared economy that was in some way part of this wave of social innovation and largely, unfortunately, has been absorbed by the neoliberal idea of the platform economy and the gig works and all the terrible, tragic idea of what does it mean to work that are related to the platform capitalism. Therefore, this is to say that the story that I'm telling you is a story of who is going in the direction that we can find as positive and promising. But in these 10 years, we have seen many of these ideas move in directions that are not the one that we like. And therefore, we can say that the issue for also for the designer, but for every expert or everybody that in a way or another want to help this process is not only to start something new, that it was and it is and it will be always very important, but it's also to help what emerge to in some way evolve, because every innovation evolve as a kind of line, a kind of trajectory of evolution, to help the trajectory of the evolution to move from where it was at the beginning toward something that is more capable to last in time, to spread without losing the original idea that we like it. And as a matter of fact, during this 15 years, we see some initial organization that was totally informal, to sometimes to become more formalized, to create some social enterprise with a structure, with also maybe a way to make their own economical life, and maybe promoting new idea of economy, and sometimes also larger programs. And the larger programs could be related to the fact that in some way also institutions enter in the scene. So where at the beginning we was very attracted by the total autonomy of these creative communities, going on in time, we discovered that there is no one, in my experience, of idea that started in a very autonomous way, and as idea lasted in time without meeting at a certain point of this trajectory the institutions. And the institution can be met in a kind of fighting way, clashing against the institutions, as it happens, because the institution maybe do not recognize the positive aspect. Or sometimes you can find some institutions that change some rules, some norms, and are capable to integrate in their own plan some ideas that come from the bottom. So at a certain point, we have seen some negative interaction between the grassroots and the institutions, but we have also some very positive one. And of course, as I said before, today now I want to talk of the positive and successful cases. And one of the most successful cases can be seen at the level of the cities. For sure, the cities are not grassroots, but there are several cities around the world that are now proposing and promoting programs that in some way can be seen as a kind of framework in which many different grassroots activity can find their own place. And one of the ways to talk about at the level of the city what it is what has been mentioned also in the presentation, what normally is called the 15-minute city, and I prefer to call for some reason the city of proximity, but more or less is the same thing. And it is a discussion about a radical change of what has been the idea of the city of the modernity, that has been the city of the zoning, that means the city in which for the sake of an idea, a wrong idea of effectiveness, there are places that are totally separated. There are where people sleep, where sleeps the rich, where sleeps the poor, and where people work in factories, where people work in offices, where you go to make your shopping, where you bring the kids to school, where you go to have your entertainment, and so on. So this idea of the city, there's a city of the zoning, the city of modernity, that is also the city of loneliness, because separating everybody, you create also more difficulties to reconnect in between a different group of people. So in any case, that one has been for 1 century the idea of the city, the modern city, and now there are stronger programs that try to break this direction and to move in the opposite direction. That is a city of the 15 minutes in which, in principle, you have practically everything that you need near to home, at few minutes walk from home. And I will not go on this idea, but I want only to underline to you that this idea that became a big program, for instance, in Barcelona with a different name, but it's the same idea. It became the program of the mayor of Paris, and she won the election with this program. It is strongly supported, for instance, in Milano, but there are several cities in the world that are in some way taking some steps in this direction. I will not go on in the city of 50 minutes. I want only to say that the city of 50 minutes, so the city of proximity, could not exist without what happened before. So if let's say the Anna Hidalgo the mayor of Paris could dare to make a campaign saying we will build a city of 15 minutes, it's only because in the previous 10 or 20 years, so many grassroots initiative happens. So this idea of the city of 15 minutes is a kind of second level of social innovation that, if you enter in detail, is also an institutional social innovation. So it's a public social innovation, and therefore it's very near, for instance, to what is at the center of the interest of this laboratory for public innovation. But what I want to say now, and moving on fast, is yes, but I already anticipate a little bit, but what you see on the left, so our nice original group of people have in common with this idea, the level of the city. So why I say that they are in the same journey, they are in the same stream of the social innovation, because they have in common that both when you discuss about grassroots initiative and when you discuss about this way of imagining the city as the city of proximity, the profile of the people, the profile of the citizen have something in common. They are collaborative people. They are people that for some reason choose to collaborate, and therefore, given that one of the main basic trend in the modernity and accelerated by the neoliberal position is this competitive individualism. If you find out people that decide to collaborate, in some way they are breaking the rules that have been imposed, or in some way forced the people to be like that for a long period. So this idea of collaborative people is, in my view, the main and the more characteristic element of what I called before the first wave of social innovation. And this idea of collaboration moved also inside the perception of well-being, inside the idea of the quality of life, generating a new idea of well-being that we can call it the collaborative well-being, that is again in a competition, in very sharp competition against the idea of well-being that are the mainstream still for the modern society, the contemporary society, that is a well-being based on your individual well-being, mainly in turn based on the marketization of everything, where the collaborative well-being asks people to generate a social capital, generate some common goods, and in some way to find the quality of life in having this shared vision about what a society could be. So this is the story of the first wave of social innovation, and now we have the but. As I told you, I tried to extract the positive part of what happened, and so it's a kind of rosy story that looks like to have a kind of happy end. Now, I want to say, not to be misunderstood, I think that what has been the content of the first wave of social innovation, for me, are super important, and they have to be reproduced also in the future. It's not finished, but there are something that could have not been evaluated enough 15 years ago, and now we cannot not consider it. And the first and most evident, especially if we are in a place as South America, is that if you go here, you see that they are white and middle class. And somebody says, oh, my social innovation at the end is a story for the middle class that is a little bit more poor, and so they are searching for living better. And my answer is mainly yes. The invention of what we have called social innovation has been not only in Europe, but in the place that have this kind of modernized condition of life. And there are some reasons that we can discuss. I do not have the time now to do it in depth, but let's say to collaborate, you need to have some spare energy and time to do it. So you can start collaborating if you have the possibility to do it. And so you can create a condition like this if people have the energy to do it. Where when you are in this kind of situation, as everybody knows, as also as Amartya Sen said very well, the poor are poor because very often they not only they do not have money, but mainly they do not have the time and the energy, the capability to make some choice freely. So they are so occupied to survive. So the open question that we have now facing the growing inequality and is there is something that we have learned from the first wave of social innovation that, as I said before, for me has been out of doubt, driven by a certain group of people into the society. And for me, it's good, but it's clearly for that group. So what could be to have a social innovation when the leading people are not that kind of people? And this is totally new. And here, maybe we can discuss afterwards, we have had a lot of social design in these places, in places like this. But I'm not talking about the social design. The social design is somebody that goes in a place like this and try to do something for the good of people. But very often you do something that could be very helpful. So I'm very respectful for social design when it's done well. But social design not necessarily change anything in the system. So I have not said, but I assume that you know that social innovation is related. This kind of social innovation is a radical, transformative social innovation. This is the formal definition. And the radical, transformative social innovation apply to change in the system. When I was discussing the first wave of social innovation, to move from the individualistic toward the collaborative idea of well-being is a system change. So the issue is it possible to imagine system change driven by the people that are living in this condition and trying in this way to improve the quality of life, but also to reduce the disequality? So this is a very big question that is open. There are some ideas, but it's still at the beginning. The second one has something to do if everything that we did until now is enough, considering the moment. And the moment is the moment of the climate catastrophe, but the more general ecological catastrophe that now we see much more than before. As you know, when we say simply social innovation, but we should say transformative social innovation towards sustainability. So it has been from the beginning that we was dealing with social innovation for sustainability. Nevertheless, in some ways, the strength of the first wave of social innovation is that it was not ideological, and so it was not starting from the idea of sustainability, but was starting from the idea of well-being. And it was a well-being that was good, not only for the individual people, but also for the community and also for the society and also for the environment. The question is, in this moment, given the level of the catastrophe, is this enough? And the answer, in my view, is not. And we should see, and we are seeing some first signal of social innovation intended as a group of people that start to do something different, driven by environmental motivation, driven by ecological motivation. Important. It is not only the Friday for the Future or the other movement that appear in the last period, because those ones are very important, but they are still movement that have people moving in the street and asking for something. So they are a political innovation, but they are not the social innovation in the sense that we said now, because the sense that we say now is not simply asking to somebody else for doing something, but it's to change something in your life and in the way in which things are organized directly. And in this case, moved by some motivation that are the urgency of the climate change and the ecological crisis. So I think that it is happening now that we can see the first signal of some we can call eco-social innovation that will be mainly driven by ecological crisis. And given what was the first issue that I discussed, hopefully also driven by people that are more in difficulties in this moment. This is the second question. The third question is about the COVID. We can see the COVID by many points of view. It's a disaster, it's terrible, but for sure it's a social experiment. From one day to the other, hundreds of millions of people changed their own life, the daily life, I mean, and also the way in which they think that they are living in this world. And it is impossible that this COVID and this worldwide social experiment will not leave something, will not create new attitude. And so the post-COVID-19 is given that everybody has started to practice some different way of living, what will remain? And what of what we have started to do in this period will remain as a lasting attitude. Everybody knows that one of the most obvious is that we live more than before online. Also, this conference is online, so it's a good example of that. So the shift from the physical to the digital could be good or could be bad, depending. And we have to look for social innovation that use also this shift toward being more in the digital space to help people to meet in the physical space. Because at the same time, the COVID has shown very clearly how important it is to be physically near. So in some way, proximity, the physical proximity became in the last period a very diffused term, exactly because through the distancing that we are being forced in this period, we discovered how important is proximity. So altogether, these three elements, I think, will bring a change in a new, not a change in the previous one. I think that it will be a new wave, but probably we have to be very attentive to be capable to recognize it. So to use the right spectacles to recognize in some way as somebody, and we did 15, 20 years ago, that we started to see something happening in the society. And I think that we have to be very attentive today, not only to be stick to the traditional idea of social innovation, that I repeat is always very important, but also to be capable to recognize if something new is happening, considering the new big challenge that we have. But before leaving you, I know that I am already out my time, but I want to say also this way of telling the story probably is not enough. And I want to tell you very, very shortly what we discussed a few days ago. We had a DESIS event in the Cumulus, so somebody know what I'm talking about. So I think that beyond, until now we have seen social innovation. I describe social innovation mainly as a social change, and this is very important. From this social change, we have seen also some institutional innovation, and this is also very important. But facing the dimension of the problem, I think that it's not enough to think as we have thought until now, but we need a cultural change that probably, even if it appears less concrete, is more basic than the other one. So what I want to say to conclude, that the traditional social, we have dealt with social innovation mainly as a problem solver. You know that one of the very famous definitions of design can be problem solving. Social innovation is a design done by normal people, not only by designers, but it has always told as a story about how to solve the problems. Well, I think that also now looking to what happened in the past 15 years, it has not been only problem solving, but it has also sense making, because the design make also sense. And now I say design as a project, I say the creative community were designing something. So they were generating not only solution, as I said until now, but also new ideas, new values, new way of making sense. And I think that social innovation is changing the idea of interactions, giving idea of quality in the relationship, changing the idea of time, giving different idea of a kind of ecology of time in which we recognize that we live in a plurality of times, and also regenerating the notion of space, a place that before there was this idea that with modernity we had no places anymore. So I think that when we discuss about the new wave of social innovation, we have to consider it not only by the point of view of how it permits to solve some problems, but also how it permits to reorganize the frame of concept on which we base our action. And one very important issue in my view, but I will not develop now, is the notion of care. That could be one of the basic idea to have an idea of a second wave of social innovation that is capable to face what the challenges that I said before. And all this can be seen as a kind of expression of a culture of complexities, cultures more than one of complexity. And yes, I think that this is the story. And I think that in some way, we are designing not only for emerging solutions, but also for emerging cultures and emerging design cultures. Sorry, I've been much longer than I expected and very fast. So I hope that it was sufficiently clear, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ezio. Thank you very much. Mariana, are you there? Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, and please don't worry because I think what you just said was probably what we were most interested to hear about. So thank you very much for your presentation. I'm also very surprised about the amount of participants we are having this morning. So we say hi to everyone. I have realized that we have participants not only from Chile, but from many places in South America, even in Europe. So welcome to all of you. And once again, Ezio, thank you for your fantastic presentation. Most of the questions that I had have been already touched by you during your presentation. So that's good, because probably we will have more time for our audience to make some comments or questions through the chat. I don't know, Mariana, would you like me to start with some questions to Professor Mancini?
I have one.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Ezio. That was very inspiring, and it touched a lot of the issues that we're currently discussing in Chile very dearly. We are in the midst of a constitutional process. We're writing a new constitution. We're about to start. We elected our representatives, and they will begin to meet soon. And a lot of what you were saying reflects the process Chile has been living since October 2018, when we had a social movement demanding change. And it's very interesting because the change that was demanded follows a lot of your logic. It was a change that didn't only want to solve problems, but it wanted to change how define what made sense. Yes, so basically it was a cultural innovation process, because it was a movement of people demanding to go back to the collective, to go back to the social, and to put that, and also the notion of care has been driven by the feminist influence of the movement, has been very much at the center of the conversation. My question had to do with how do we make this new sense making so that it makes sense to everyone? Here in Chile, this wave of change, of cultural innovation, has created a lot of anxiety and opposition from the groups that mainly directed or dictated what made sense before. So this cultural shift, this cultural innovation, hasn't come without conflict, as usual, as it's obvious, right? But how do we manage this transition? Because it is something that has to eventually call upon the will or the force of everyone in society for it to work after the obvious period of perhaps conflict or clash. There has to be a period in which we get to resolve this as a society and move on with this new cultural frame in which we're going to move. So considering we are at the moment in which we're probably going to clash a lot and discuss and converse, what tools or what lessons do you have for us to manage this transition, if any? I know the question is not an easy one, but
no, you know that I cannot answer, so it's not a question. You can state that it's like this. Mm-hmm. And now, not because I'm talking with you that you are in Chile, but I think that maybe Chile has a special possibility, because I think, sorry, I will say one thing. Social innovation do not start where the problems are more heavy. Social innovation starts where there are problems and there are people that could have, for some reason, the energy to find solutions. And Chile, and this maybe now this is a stereotype, I hope not, but in the spectrum of South America, and not only, is a country that has shared a lot with the rest of South America, but it's also relatively more effective working, etc., etc. So, so maybe you could be in a position to bridge what has been those ideas that came from the previous wave of social innovation with something that it could be more near to the problem of so many parts in the population. But okay, I told it, but maybe it would be better for me not to dare to say something about what could be the future of Brazil or Chile. But to go back to the core of your question, or your observation, I can say something that, of course, it has to be scaled at a different scale. But what we learn from, exactly because we have 10 years of story about social innovation, is that it's a very difficult path in between, on one side, to close yourself. So you have a very good idea and you try to keep 100% of this good idea. And this create condition. I can talk simply eco-housing. I'm talking a very small scale. It could be a group, a cooperative, a food co-op. It could be, but you want to start with a certain principle in a certain way, and you try to keep everything as it is. And in general, this way of doing die. Because they could not resist in this way, or they close themselves in any case, and they become some island that have no contact with the other ones. On the opposite, you have that there is a good idea, and to spread the good idea, you accept too many compromises. And so accepting so many compromises, you lose all the good ideas that was inside. I was using, just because it's the best known example, the case of moving from the idea of a carpooling toward the Uber. And the Uber was Uber not, but the idea was a carpooling. And afterward, the capital venture arrived and asked for profit, and they accepted. And the result is the Uber is a platform, as all the other capitalist platforms that create slaves, basically. But you have, for instance, something that is called well, another one, the name will call me, that designing something in the way in which the platform is done, avoid to become Uber. And what is, for instance, that the driver cannot drive for other more than a certain hour a day. What does it mean? That you cannot be a professional driver. Or the etiquette is such that you can not enter on the back seat, but you have to enter in the front seat. That what does it mean? That we are more or less equal. So I took this example that could appear small and banal, but to say you can have some norms that in some way create condition that avoid or make less probable evolution in a bad condition, or because people close themselves and so the idea do not spread, do not change the society, or because it is in some way reabsorbed by new idea of a neo-capitalistic way of doing. So the role of the normative are fundamental. And we start to have some norms that, that are very useful to permit this kind of discussion. Afterwards, this is not the solution of the problem, because by definition, when we talk about social innovation, we talk about something that is not like, that is not, for sure, it's not something that everybody accepts. It's something that starts to bring a conversation, and afterward this conversation can spread and maybe become also, hopefully, the mainstream, but it's not something that is acceptable for everybody. So in this transition, of course, it could be very difficult. And maybe I've spoken so much to not to answer to your question, but maybe you will find some solution, and maybe the Chile case will become the new examples that will be proposed. And yeah.
Mhm.
I have a question. It's connected to that. I know you are an optimistic, but I must admit that a few years ago I had the chance to listen to you, and you were a little pessimistic. Probably Trump was still on power, but you were really concerned about democracy. And I remember you saying that democracy is probably the most important contribution from Occidental culture, and we have to care, maintain, and take care of democracy. But democracy comes with norms, comes with institutions, and are precisely those institutions that are now undermined, that people are not necessarily trusting in institution. So, and this also has to do with scaling. One of the challenge I see from the first wave of design for social innovation was that those grassroots movement was super good in very local communities, but when, as you say, when those communities don't have time or don't have the spare time to do it, you need institutions, and so you have been probably one of the most important promoter of bottom-up processes, but we also, it seems that we also need top-down institutions to create those norms, those. So how do you see the role of designers or citizens to, I don't know how to say, to infiltrate institutions or to re-evaluate or revalidate institution?
Okay, but there was more than one question in your question.
I'm sorry. It has to do with the scaling, it has to do with democracy, it has to do with institutions, sorry.
Let's say for the other, because the other people do not know, but Jose and me, we know each other since 20 years, maybe more than 20 years. And I am a professional optimist. So this is the definition. So if you ask me if now in general, I'm really thinking that everything is going for the best, I don't know. I could be quite pessimist more now than when you refer maybe 5 or 3 years ago. Nevertheless, given that I'm sure that the reality is not a kind of monolith, it's not a kind of one big machine, it's a complex entity. Into the reality, you can find also something good. And therefore, I am a professional optimist because I try to do what I can to promote what, in my personal interpretation, seems to be promising. So by that point of view, I will be optimist until the day that, hopefully not, but the planet will explode. I will try to find where there are something that can be done. And now the contradiction is that if I tell you the story, when I said I will tell you the nice story about social innovation, and it's totally true, it's not fake. There are some things that are happening today that was unimaginable 20 years ago, unimaginable. To have a city, to have a mayor that makes the campaign saying something that is 100% in line with everything that we were saying for 15 years or 20 years, it was absolutely incredible 20, 15 years ago. So if we look at that, we can say that something very positive happened. Unfortunately, at the same time, there are counter trends or main trends that goes in a totally different direction, and they are very dangerous. So for instance, now I'm dealing, as you said, with this idea of the city of proximity, and I'm betting and I'm promoting the city of proximity against the city of zoning, the city of distances, the cities of loneliness. But we know that after the COVID, what has accelerated is not only the city of proximity, there is also what I call in my scenarios called the city of everything at home and from home. That is a kind of dystopia in which ideally, not ideally, but hopefully everybody stay at home and do everything from home. So you have no any public space anymore. So you say, but what do you think that will happen? I have to admit that the city of everything from home, at least in many places that I know, is stronger than the city of proximity. Nevertheless, also the city of proximity is moving on. So we have to know that there is a clash in between different ideas, and we have to take our position. So the political choice is to recognize in everything that you do, where is the line in between who has a certain position and who has a different position. Maybe also not knowing. It's not that the other are all evil. Maybe they do not know. Maybe it's simply it looks something simple and easy, etc., etc. So this is for what regard to be positive or negative or pessimistic. And for democracy, I will not now enter in this issue because it's so huge. I have no reason to be more optimistic today than in the past, even though we don't have Trump, but we have Mr. Biden. But there are some very deep motivation for the crisis of the democracy that the Western society has generated as a kind of social innovation. And maybe if somebody makes some specific question, I can answer, but all the reason to say that democracy is weak in this moment, and so we should, the one that like this idea of democracy have to do the best, not only to promote, but also to help to renew it, because democracy at the end is a kind of machine that has been built in a period in which communication was a certain kind of communication, society was a certain kind of society. If the society are totally diverse, and if we have other media of communication, of course, we have to keep what is the deep meaning of that we like of democracy, and there also to experiment something new. And yeah, so these are the two things. You were saying a third one, the last one, I don't remember now.
No, it's about institutions.
Yes. No, the institution. So maybe now, for the sake of the discussion, I could say that I disagree with you No, probably I disagree with the way in which you told the story, but maybe it's not what you really think. You said, given that these small things are so slow, we need the institution. And this could appear that you can have something that is totally top-down. Well, I think that the good way to have the institution cannot exist without the grassroots. So it's not that because the grassroots is so slow, you need the institution that do something top-down. You need that to give it to the possibility to the grassroots to exist. You need a new governance, and the governance create condition to spread and multiply activity. I always make this example. If you want, in the traditional governance is you decide to make a park, a garden, you the institution, and if you have the money, you do it. And you do it without having to ask to anybody the garden. You suppose that people will like to have a garden, and the garden is done. If you want to have a community garden, and you simply say, we will have a community garden here, if the community don't do the community garden will not happen. Therefore, you as an institution can create conditions to have an easier way to do a community garden. 30 years ago, the community gardeners were called guerrilla gardener, and they had to clash against the police to make. So they was so distant, the idea from the institution. Now, everywhere people understood that to have a community garden is good by every point of view. And therefore, practically in every city that I know, if a group of people want to start a community garden, do not find the necessity to crash against the institution, but sometimes the institution help you. So this is the new form of governance. So a governance that help people, that give people opportunities, that give people stimuli in case, but at the end of the day, for what we are telling now, if people do not do it, nothing happens. So the grassroots could not be the starting point. So it's a kind of issue about the chicken and the egg. For many example, it's not so important to say if the first move has been done from bottom up or the first move sometimes is done from top down. But at a certain point, you have to have this double link in between the two, because otherwise, maybe there's something else that can be done only top down. But what we are talking about today cannot be done by top down. Top down can create, and sometimes I talked so much, but
no.
When we say there is the grassroots and there is the top, you see my hands, Italians talks with the hands. Yes, maybe this it appears so obvious. It has to be totally changed because you should have grassroots and platforms. So the new governance should not be perceived as something from the top, but has to be perceived as a kind of ground that is prepared and permit to flourish many different things. So in some way, there is a bottom of a prepared ground of norm, incentives, and whatever that create condition in which the grassroots can develop and flourish. So probably instead of being grassroots and top-down should be institutions and the grassroots on the top.
Wow, with such a fantastic metaphor. I don't know, Mariana, perhaps I don't know if you have a question or we can ask.
I just wanted to make a brief summary of some of the comments.
Exactly.
And the questions from the public. I know we are on time, but just very briefly, Daniel and Fidel and Catalina have mentioned a lot of examples from Chile in which the poor are creating social innovation, communal kitchens, the struggle to reclaim water resources in agricultural areas that have been overexploited, and there's a lot of examples in the chat which we can copy for you later on because they're very interesting about what's going on here, and a lot of it has has translated into this constitutional process as well. And there were so I just wanted to, that we also have some examples from Brazil in which people have been talking about sort of an eco-social culture based on recycling at the local level, which has already also pushed that forward. And I wanted to take two small questions, not small maybe, but two questions from the because you've answered most of the ones that were placed, but one that has to do with what is the role of the university and students in this. So because we have a lot of students and because we are a university, I wanted to put forward that question to you. And the other one is a question about the word innovation and its relation to the neoliberal kind of paradigm. So we have a question by Renato asking if maybe we can seek a different term in order to reflect upon this kind of waves of change that we are experiencing.
Or this idea of innovation as producing always new products or new things that we were discussing last Friday.
So these two questions, I know there's also a lot, but it's very interesting to hear your thoughts.
I also, so I have time, I have not to finish. So for me, I'm not in a hurry, but I know that in any case, things cannot be so long. I start from the second one. Well, there are many people that do not like the term innovation. We can find another one, but innovation is a generic term. So the invention of the trade unions is an innovation of the 19th century. The co-op of consumer is an innovation of the 19th century. So there have been social innovation also in the past. And also the technological innovation are not necessarily all of them for the market, the neoliberal market. The use of a platform to, for instance, a platform for citizens that help citizens in having a say in the city, as we have, for instance, in Barcelona. This is an innovation. So you can, if you don't like, I don't know what to do, it can be changed, but it's not the innovation means the neoliberal. Means there is a theory, there is an invention. The invention, when it's applied into reality, can become innovation, and the innovation during the time can be consolidated. In my view, that is innovation. And in my view, just to move toward what is the role of the university, one of the role, and afterward I will say something else, is exactly to try to give the right, to give a meaning to the terms. So I know that it's paradoxical because, okay, innovation, I understand that the issue is about the fact that it has been used so much by the more neoliberal, so it's stinking. But in any case, it has, the meaning is another one. But I know that I work, not only me, but we worked a lot on the notion of resilience, making our best to make people understand what is resilience. And now, given that finally the world has been successful, there are so many people saying, oh no, but resilience is not because, oh my God, sorry. But if somebody use it in the wrong term, our role as a university is to say what is the right term. And the same is for sustainability. So maybe in the future we will find something else. But at the moment, what we can describe, what we have to do and we can describe is called a sustainable society. If it has been used by everybody, it is used in the wrong way. One of the role of the university, until it is an autonomous entity, they make research and reflection, is to do the best that we can to give to the term their own meaning and not the fake meaning that has been given that the term is successful. It's used in many different ways. But beyond that, of course, for all, so the transition toward a sustainable and resilient society ask for every kind of knowledge. But now, to be a little bit more simple, if we talk about project-based knowledge, that could be in design, it could be also something else. But in any case, people that are there to develop something new, well, the universities that are based on the project have a fundamental role to make a good project, not only to find good solution, but to use a project to develop new ideas. And just to give an idea of how things can change, in Europe, I don't know if you have also in Chile, but in Europe, there is something called the third mission. You know what is the third mission? You have also, it exists also in Europe, in Chile?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Our
So,
university.
in my view, we should do our best to make clear that the third mission is fundamental.
Mm.
So I explained for the one that maybe do not know what is the third mission. So of course, the school, the university has to teach. This is the first mission. And afterward, to teach well, especially in moment of big change, you have to make research. If you don't make research, you are not capable to teach well. And therefore, second mission is to make research and to generate the new knowledge. And afterward, given that every university is a group of people, students, teachers, and technicians based somewhere in the territory, we have an impact. In any case, we have an impact. So it's very important to evaluate the impact of what we do today. So where you prepare the student for the future, but the student and the teacher, when they are studying and teaching, they can develop projects and activity that could have a social impact. And to recognize the importance of the third mission, that at the moment, at least in Europe, is mentioned by the European community, but is not yet so applied, it could be fundamental. Why? Because if you are a young professor, if you are a professor in general, but especially if you are at the beginning of your career, you are evaluated. And if now you are evaluated for your teaching and for your research, and it's correct, but you could be evaluated for your teaching, your research, and the social work that you are doing. So imagine if all the school of design, all the school of architecture, all the schools that have something to do with society could have the professors that knows that they have to do something also on this third mission. It will give a power to the university, a possibility to the university to play a role that is incredibly more developed than what is today, because as a matter of fact, many of the things that we call social innovation are not so much recognized as real research, for instance, because they say, this applied research is not real research. Or maybe sometimes you cannot teach it so directly. So I think that if we take this idea of the third mission, this is the answer to the question, what the university can do. The university can have three missions: to prepare for a sustainable society for the future, thanks to teaching and thanks to generating knowledge, and also today to help the transition entering in the arena with your project, with your ideas, becoming an agent in change.
Thank
Wow.
you, Ezio.
Thank you very much, Ezio. I think we ran out of time, and we really appreciate this. You don't have idea how much I would like to have you physically in Chile, in our university, but I promise it will be sooner than later.
Yeah. I will be happy to have the nice trips that we did last time also.
In a different Chile. Thank you very much. We really appreciate all our attendance for your questions. We are super sorry not being able to assess all of them, but I think Ezio really your talk was super inspiring, and once again, thank you very much for all your time.
You and good luck. And really, when you, sorry, I have to say one thing. I'm very happy that some example arrived, and I think that is very important to circulate. So very probably, frankly speaking, the first wave of social innovation had a core in the Anglo-Saxon country. And I am very grateful because I learned a lot for them. Nevertheless, I think that the second wave should not be so Anglo-Saxon, not only for ideological reason, but simply because traditionally, at least in design, the Anglo-Saxon position was mainly a solutionist, I say, so something based on solutions. And this is very practical, very pragmatical, very good, but it's also its limit, because the problems in life and in the social life are not only solve specific problem, but it's also to change some frame. Therefore, I think that the new wave should start somewhere else. And I will not say that somewhere else is mainly Chile, but Chile could be one of those places. And this is really my hope. And I'm very curious to see the projects that your colleagues have proposed. And I thanks them and try to give them visibility and to have a new wave of examples that comes from these countries. Ciao, see you.
Thank you very much, Ezio, for your talk. Very inspiring, and we will definitely be letting you know about what's going on here and bridging through lots of
also send me a copy of the chat so I see what people said. Okay.
We'll do.
Of course.
We will do.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Arrivederci, caro.
Thank you. Gracias a todos por conectarse. Esta fue la conversación con Ezio Mazzini. Queda grabado en el canal de YouTube del Centro de Políticas Públicas. Les agradecemos muchísimo a todos por conectarse el día de hoy.
¿Podemos copiar el link en el chat antes de irnos?
Tendremos el chat grabado.
Perfecto. Sí. Buenísimo. Muchas gracias, Cristóbal. Te dejamos a ti para que cierre.
Muy bien, muchas gracias a todos. Volveremos a hacer este ciclo de seminarios en las próximas semanas y les estaremos avisando a todos los que se han inscrito. Que tengan muy buen día.